Okay, this is our second lecture for Greek 1. If you're following along in your textbook, the basics of biblical Greek grammar by William Mounce. This lecture is a little shorter than the last one. We're just going to cover um, chapter 5, which is an introduction to English nouns. And now, if you remember English grammar, from high school, then a lot of this is going to be a little bit overkill. But for those of you that have been out of high school for a while, or like me, didn't pay attention because you went to public school, this is going to be helpful. So let's talk about the various parts of a noun because you're going to need to know this stuff as it pertains to learning New Testament Greek. So you already know this, you just don't think about the rules in speaking English. English is a very difficult language to learn if you don't speak English as a first language. And this happens in every language, but you don't think about the rules, you just do it because you know English. But there's a rule that applies to nouns that we refer to as inflection. Inflection is just a fancy word for describing how the form of a word changes related to the sentence. So if you wanted to, so my oldest daughter's name's Rebecca, my youngest daughter's Hannah. If I wanted to say something about Rebecca or Hannah, but I didn't want to use the name Rebecca or Hannah, then I may say, she is my daughter. So the subject there is she. It means a female, and I'm referring to a female person, right? Or I may say, I love her. In both of those cases, I am talking about the same person using different words. I'm using pronouns, right? So she is my daughter. She is the subject of that sentence. I love her. Her would be the direct object. We're going to talk about subject and direct object. So inflection can occur based on the form of how the word functions in a sentence, but it can also change based on meaning, right? He and she are my children. So if I talk about Rebecca and Hannah, or if I talk about Reese and Hannah, then instead of saying Reese and Hannah are my children, I might say he and she are my children. So words change. I think you get that point that we will use pronouns to reflect various changes in proper nouns in other nouns. So pronouns are the most inflected of the words that you're going to find in the sentences. And inflection is primarily related to case. And there are three cases. So let's talk about those three cases of a noun. The first case is the subjective case. So if the word that you're using in the sentence is the subject, if it's doing the action of the verb, then we would say that that noun or that pronoun is in the subjective case. Kirsten went to college. Kirsten is the subject of that sentence. Went would be the verb, and to college would be prepositional phrase. College would be the object of the preposition. So the dog ate my shoe, right? So Kirsten is subject, the dog is a subject. Typically in English, we identify the subject. It's usually the first noun or the pronoun, and it typically is the who or the what related to the action of the verb. Now, just going to warn you a little bit, and it's not hard. You just have to figure it out. We rely very heavily in English on word order. If I want to say that I went to the store, that is a natural way to say it. That's a reasonable way to say it. There are other ways I can say it, but that's really the best way. I went to the store. I is the subject, went's the verb, right? So in Greek and in other languages, Hebrew, in Greek, the word order is not that important based on either a prefix or a suffix, a lot of times a suffix. Based on a prefix or a suffix, it's going to tell you whether it's the case is going to be subjective or not. And you'll learn that, don't worry. But in English, typically we identify the subject because it's the first noun in a subject. So the first case related to inflection would be the subjective case. The second is possessive. Very simple. The reputation of the teacher is good. The teacher's reputation is good. Teachers, apostrophe S, indicates possession. We indicate possession in English typically with an apostrophe. But teachers and of the teacher and his all communicate possession. What you're going to find in Greek is possession is going to be in a certain case, the genitive case, and you will be able to identify that by a suffix or a prefix, or a suffix and a prefix, depending on what the noun is. So the second type of inflection is possessive. So we have subjective. That would be when a noun or pronoun is the subject of the sentence. And you have possessive. That is when the noun or the pronoun indicates ownership, that the noun owns something, possesses something, a possession. And then the third inflection, the third case, would be objective. This is a direct object. And again, this is where, we all should have paid more attention in the 10th grade. So the direct object receives action of the verb, right? The pastor helped him. Him is receiving the action of helped. So the would be the definite article, and we're going to talk about articles in just a minute. The would be the definite article. Pastor would be a noun. That would be the subject. Helped would be the verb. And then him would be the direct object. Generally, the direct object follows the verb. This is the case in Greek as well. And it tells you what or whom receives the action of the verb. So we have subjective, possessive, and objective. There are some other forms that you need to think about in terms of inflection. You have number, which is singular or plural, right? Student or students. It's pretty simple. We don't have this in English as much. You do have it in Spanish. You have it in German, most other languages. You have masculine, feminine, and neuter. Now, I'm just going to warn you that masculine, feminine, and neuter does not always refer to male or female or non-human. Generally speaking, it's going to follow those rules, but it doesn't always. For instance, man, the word man would be masculine. The word woman would be feminine. And the word rock would be neuter. But sin and sinner might fall under either of those three categories, not necessarily related to gender. So gender in language and gender as it refers to human sexuality is not an exact one for one. So in language, you're going to have masculine, feminine, and neuter. So you have plural, books, men, children, moose, not mooses, but moose. Doesn't really affect meaning, right? So plural doesn't affect meaning. It's just more of the same in the singular. The parts of speech, we're talking about nouns and adjectives. Nouns stand for something. When I was in school, we learned that nouns were person, places, or things. That's kind of how we learned it in the first grade in public school in South Georgia, which probably means there's a better way to define it, but that's how I've always defined it. A noun is a person, place, or thing. You also have adjectives. Adjectives modify a noun, right? The dark brown Bible. The Bible is the noun. The dark brown are the adjectives. And I'm moving through this pretty quickly because I'm guessing that you have to finish high school to make it to college here. So we're just going to highlight this stuff and move on. I don't want to belabor it. We also need to be familiar with prepositions. Prepositions describe relationships between items. You have spatial prepositions. The Bible is under the table. Under is the preposition. Under the table would be the prepositional phrase. You have temporal, after playing basketball. So after playing basketball is the prepositional phrase. Then you have to think about the object of the preposition, like Bill is under the table, under the table. Table is the object of the preposition. So you have prepositions, prepositional phrases, objects of the preposition. Seems very elementary here, but you have to remember when it comes to a sentence, you have two parts of the sentence, a subject and a predicate. The teacher plays too much basketball. The teacher would be the subject, and plays too much basketball would be the predicate. So essentially, if you're trying to define the subject and the predicate of a sentence, the subject would be what the sentence is about, and the predicate would be everything else. So subject and predicate. And then in English and also in Greek, you have the articles. You have a definite and an indefinite article. The definite article is always the. So what you're going to learn, for instance, you're going to learn that there are a number of ways to say the in Greek, and it's based on it's going to follow the declension of the noun. So if the noun is a nominative, masculine, singular, then that's what the article is going to be. And even though those terms don't mean anything to you, they will very, very soon. But the noun and the article are always going to match so that you know that that article goes with that noun. And so you'll have a definite article, but then you'll have an indefinite article, which is a or an. So if I said the dog, the is a definite article. If I said a dog, a is an indefinite article. You're also going to find that whether you use a or an are also going to be, sorry, went too far. A or an are also going to follow the same rules similarly that you have in English. We wouldn't say a apple, we would say an apple, right? It would follow similar to those same rules. This is just FYI. You don't even need to know this until the 15th chapter of this book. But we're not really going to study verbs till chapter 15, which is weird for me because when I took Greek, verbs is the first thing we learned. We learned present, active, indicative. And you'll learn it too. But just know that when you have a verb, the ending of the verb is going to indicate how you translate the verb based on person and number. So let's take grapho, right? You learned that word last night or the night before, Monday night. You learned grapho, which means I write. You probably learned graphe, which is writing, but grapho is I write. Well, graphes, you can see that grapho ends with an omega. Graphes ends with epsilon iota sigma, means you write. Second person singular, you write. Whereas graphe is third person singular, he, she, or it writes. Graphomen would be first person plural, they write. There's also a second person plural and a third person plural, which is he, she, it writes. But just know that when it comes to verbs, the ending of the verb means that that verb can be its own sentence. So you can see one word in Greek. You can see the word graphomen with a period. And you would translate that as they write, period. You see it here. You can also have what they call an expressed or an unexpressed subject. So going back just a slide, if the sentence is graphomen or graphomen, they write, that is an unexpressed subject, meaning that you understand that because of the suffix omicron, mu, epsilon, nu, because of that, you see that and you know, okay, that is present active indicative, first person plural, they write. That is an unexpressed subject. The subject is expressed in the way you translate the word, versus an expressed subject would be su graphes, which is you write. So if you saw su graphes, then you would translate it you write. But you would know, because you're going to learn this, that another way to translate that may be you yourself write, like to emphasize you yourself. We covered this a little bit in the first lecture, but the Greek phrase ego eimi. Ego means I. Eimi means myself or I am. And so you could literally translate ego eimi. We translate I am, but you could translate I myself am. It's an emphatic. All this is stuff you'll learn later. All I'm teaching you is that when it comes to Greek sentences and nouns and the subjective case, sometimes when it's a verb, the subjective case can be expressed or unexpressed. And here you see another example of that. Graphe, he writes, she writes, it writes. All right, summarize this lecture. I should have paid attention in school because when I took this in Greek, I'd forgotten all of this. Inflection is just a term we use to say that the form of the noun changes based on various criteria. The function, the meaning, the number, the gender, the case, right? And there are three cases. We talked about the different parts of the speech: nouns, adjectives, prepositions, predicate, subject, definite, indefinite article. We talked about Greek verbs, expressed or unexpressed subject. So that's it for chapter 5. And so we're gonna put a pin in this chapter. We're gonna put a pin in our first week of New Testament Greek and move on to the next section in our next lecture. Hope this was helpful.